On his very first day in office this year, Donald Trump attempted to unilaterally rewrite one of the core features of the American Constitution, one that was put into that document after the bloody horror of slavery and the Civil War. And today, the question of whether he has the ability to do that and what the courts are going to do about it landed before the Supreme Court.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the Midas Touch Network. Birthright citizenship. It is the fundamental guarantee enshrined in the Constitution that says if you are born here, you are an American. There is nothing ambiguous about the language establishing that right. But in yet another example of the legal, linguistic, and moral gymnastics of the Trump administration, that right is being threatened because it undermines the central project of Trump's second term, casting out undesirables. In this case, Americans born here or naturalized and guaranteed citizenship by the Constitution. I have been struggling to understand the thought processes of seemingly intelligent people who argue that the Constitution doesn't say what it says. I've listened to the oral arguments. I've even watched, so you don't have to, the right-wing PragerU explanation videos defending this attack on the Constitution. But the bottom line is that their argument isn't a legal or a moral one. It is purely political, articulated for the sole purpose of justifying Donald Trump's brutal and racist anti-immigrant and white nationalist agenda. I spoke with Reed Galen, a longtime Republican political strategist, now a former Republican and co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Here's our conversation. Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. I'm joined today by Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, and a veteran Republican strategist, now a former Republican, right, Reed?
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the show. Great to have you on. I remember the first time Trump suggested ending birthright citizenship, and everybody in my world, the cognoscenti, the legal types said, this is another troll. This is a joke. There is no way this gets any further. Lo and behold, arguments are going up in front of the Supreme Court this week. And, I think this should be illuminating for us as to how the Trump administration, Trump world, thinks about moving its agenda. It teases, then it provokes, and then it normalizes what just a few months ago would have seemed outrageous. What's your take?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to, anybody who's still surprised by anything that's happening needs to really get over that. This is happening. This is real life. I would not recommend standing in front of the fire hose all day, every day, but I understand why some people doom scroll. But I think you're right, which is you start outrageous, you say, I'm not serious, you joke about it, and then you bring it back. And he signed an executive order on the first day of his second presidency to do this. And, this goes back to the 14th Amendment in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War to, basically give former slaves, now freed slaves, citizenship, right? Because they, other than having a very strange 3/5 status in the Constitution as far as representation was concerned, they weren't considered people. They certainly weren't considered citizens. And so that has been the rule since then, since, 160 years, whatever it is we're going on here, Ken. And so, this is aimed obviously at the children of immigrants who have come here and are undocumented. But the problem becomes, what I think you're talking about is how expansive could it be? Now, my family, my dad's side of the family came here in 1905 from, it was either Lithuania or Poland or Ukraine, whatever it was, right? They came through Ellis Island. So at some point, right, my forebears were not citizens. And the question is now, well, can you take away my citizenship, right? Were my grandparents, great-grandparents, only citizens because they were born here? And I think that's where you start to unravel this stuff. And as we've already seen, they're picking people up off the street. They're putting mostly men on airplanes, regardless of status, and sending them places. They're now picking up people at airports. And so I think you're your point at the beginning is the right one, which is we have to get out of this idea of it can't happen here. It would never happen here. This is America. And, it could start with birthright citizenship. It could start with the idea of, what we call habeas corpus, which I think we should call being arrested for anything or nothing. Right? It could be any of those things that we took as sort of foundational pieces of the world we have known, and understand that the Trump administration is systematically taking a sledgehammer to each and every one of them.
We have come so far and sacrificed so much to make real the promise that is America. But fear and hate are on the rise, and those who sow division claim a mantle they do not deserve. They do not speak for us. For the millions of American men who believe that strength is found in compassion, that patriotism is defending the least among us. At Valor Media, we know that loving one's country means holding it accountable. We reject the sunshine patriots and the false prophets of masculinity. We are Navy SEALs, Marines, Rangers, fighter pilots, and more. We are Valor Media. Find us, follow us, join us at valormedianetwork.com.
Just so there's no confusion, I'm going to read the text of the 14th Amendment. This is not an ambiguous right. It is as clear as the ink it's written in. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. I don't think it could be any more clear, and I think the Supreme Court arguments this week are about the writ of lower courts to make this judgment, but it is opening the Pandora's box, right? And I'm wondering if you think even the Republicans are surprised at their success. Are they the dog that caught the car? Because even most Republicans I talked to back when Trump issued that EO said it was a dog whistle. It wasn't real. But look where they are. They have the entire country talking about this now.
Well, they have the entire country talking, and this is also part of what these sorts of regimes do, which is, as we've seen so far, who are the people that they have persecuted most? Those of either undocumented / illegal immigration status, or people who have been very outspoken on things like the war in Gaza, right? People with, either of Muslim extraction, or something similar. So what does that do? First, it starts to other those people. It starts to objectify those people. They're objects instead of subjects. And now you will have a bunch of people who say, well, Ken, they shouldn't have been here in the first place. Or, well, maybe if they just kept their mouth shut, none of this would be happening. Or, well, at least it's not me, right? But it never stays that way, right? There's the old Martin Niemöller, right? First they came for me and I said, no, first they came for these people and I said nothing, and then they came for me and there was no one left. That's the worst possible extent. And I hope it doesn't get that far, and I hope the American populace would not allow that. But we should not assume that because the things that we're seeing are alarming and appalling, that there is anywhere near, frankly, popular outrage about it yet. I don't think that there is. I think that the other part that we've seen, and this is part of the disengagement from tens of millions of Americans, is you got a lot of people saying, like, I don't know what that is. Me and my family were born here. I'm trying to get through the day, right? And this is exactly what Trump has been doing for decades, but really for the last 10 years here in the U.S. And the right-wing media machine, which is incredibly efficient and effective, keeps those people at bay, saying, is this really your fight? These aren't your people, right? Are they supposed to be here? Are they doing this? Why did they do that? If they came here illegally and they had an anchor baby, right? Should that anchor baby, Ken, really be a citizen? And it's frankly a question that most Americans haven't had to ask or answer because, it doesn't take much to be an American if you're born here, right? Like we don't ask much civically of our citizens. We also don't treat ourselves very well. But the point is that I think that they're counting on a level of apathy that just says, again, I just want this all to go away. I don't want to hear about it.
That was part one of my conversation with Reed Galen. In part two, later this week, he discusses what we need to do to make Americans aware of what is going on and how we cannot count on the courts to save us without a real demonstration of public pressure. See you then.